It was a quiet autumn evening in our small town. The leaves had started to turn a brilliant shade of orange, and a crisp chill hung in the air. I was but a child at the time, and the world seemed to hold an innocent charm that I would later learn was merely a veneer. Our town was nestled amidst a sea of lush forests and rolling hills, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business, or so we thought. The arrival of the woman would forever change the quietude of our town. She came with the falling leaves, a stranger who settled into a modest cottage at the edge of town. Her name, if she ever revealed it, was quickly forgotten. She was a solitary figure, living alone in that quaint cottage, surrounded by a well-tended garden that she doted on tirelessly. In our town, animals were a ubiquitous presence in every household. Cats prowled the alleys, dogs guarded their domains, and even chickens pecked around in their backyard coops. Yet the woman was different. She had no animals of her own, and her neighbors, ever eager to befriend newcomers, had once gifted her with a pair of chickens. Those poor creatures didn't last long in her care. At first, the woman was an enigma to our town, a quiet and polite presence. She would visit one neighbor for a cup of sugar and another for a conversation, but it wasn't long before people began to notice something strange. As soon as the woman crossed the threshold into a house, a peculiar transformation occurred. Cats, usually the picture of indifference, would hiss and yowl as they scrambled to escape her presence. Dogs, those loyal companions, would become frenzied, barking and growling as if an intruder threatened their territory. Even the poultry, usually content in their pens, would flap their wings and squawk in alarm whenever she ventured near. Fear began to permeate our town, and people whispered that she was a witch, a harbinger of the evil eye. Folks avoided her on the streets, crossing to the other side when they saw her approach. The children, ever curious and cruel, devised their own torment. They would capture unsuspecting cats and chickens, sneaking into her garden to release them. What followed was nothing short of chaos, as the terrified animals bolted through the garden, crashing through fences in their desperate escape. The woman, for her part, bore this torment with stoic grace. She never raised her voice in anger, never retaliated against the children who taunted her. It was as if she had accepted her role as the town's outcast, embracing it even. One fateful day, the ranger of our town, a rugged man in his 40s, happened to meet this woman. He was returning from a long day in the forest, riding his trusty horse, when he happened upon her. She was naked, covered in mud, a strange sight that would have been unsettling on its own. But what truly terrified the ranger was his horse's reaction. The steed reared up on its hind legs, eyes wide with terror, and bolted like a bat out of hell. The ranger clung to the reins, struggling to regain control, his heart pounding in his chest. It was only after a perilous chase that he managed to bring the horse to a halt. The encounter left the ranger shaken, and he would later recount how he felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him in the woman's presence. He, too, joined the ranks of those who believed she was no mere mortal. As the strange occurrences continued, our town fell deeper into a state of fear and paranoia. The woman remained an enigma, and despite the many watchful eyes trained on her, no one could catch her in the act of practicing sorcery. Rumors swirled like dark clouds on a stormy night, each more outlandish than the last. Some believed she was a werewolf, a beast in human form. Local hunters claimed to recognize the same wild behavior in their dogs when they encountered a true beast in the woods. Others whispered that she was a demon, sent to test our town's resolve. But in all the fear and uncertainty, the truth remained elusive. What was it about this woman that terrified animals and humans alike? What dark secret did she harbor in the depths of her soul? And then, one fateful night, as our town celebrated Halloween Day, the woman disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she had gone or what had become of her. Her cottage with its well-kept garden stood silent and abandoned. Strangely, all her belongings remained untouched, as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The town's ranger, always watchful, claimed to have seen a strange creature in the woods that very night, leading some to speculate that she had returned to her true form. I've always been a skeptic. It's what led me to become an avid hunter, fearless in the face of the wild and the unknown. But there was one night, one ominous Halloween, when my skepticism would be put to the ultimate test. I'll never forget that evening. The full moon hung in the sky like a silver coin, casting an eerie glow over our humble farmstead. My heart was set on hunting a bear, and nothing, not even the ominous tales of my grandmother, could dissuade me. She believed that on a night like this, on a full moon, one could encounter the most terrifying creatures of legends. My grandmother, a woman of unshakable superstition, begged me not to go into the forest. Her eyes looked at me, begging me to change my mind. But I laughed at her stories, considering them folklore, the ravings of a bygone era. "Believe in fairy tales, you say?" "Nonsense," I retorted, my stubbornness flaring. Unperturbed by her warnings, I shouldered my rifle and set off into the forest, determined to prove her wrong. Her cries of dismay and anger followed me, but I remained resolute. The rustling leaves, the gentle whisper of the wind, they all seemed to mock her ancient beliefs. I found a suitable spot, concealed myself, and awaited the night's embrace. Midnight approached, marked by the twinkling stars above. The forest grew eerily silent, as if it held its breath in anticipation. Then it began, a cacophony of rattling branches and rustling foliage, as if the very forest itself had come alive. My grip on the rifle tightened, and I raised it, ready to face whatever lurked in the shadows. From the depths of the forest, a sound reached my ears, one that sent shivers down my spine. A bear, or so it seemed. But as I peered through the inky darkness, I could discern no shape, no form. The footsteps drew nearer, yet no creature materialized. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from an unseen force that seemed to paralyze me. And then, a sinister laughter emerged from the abyss, echoing through the night. "What's the matter? Can't pull the trigger? Can't kill me?" taunted a voice, its chilling words hanging in the air. I struggled against the invisible grip that held me, but it was as if my very essence had been drained. The laughter continued, wild and maddening, and my fear threatened to consume me whole. Then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the laughter ceased, and the footsteps retreated into the depths of the forest. My gun, slipped from my trembling grasp, clattered to the ground. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I watched the impenetrable darkness recede. I turned and fled, stumbling over roots and rocks, my heart pounding in my chest. I was neither dead nor alive as I dashed back to the safety of our farmstead. My eyes darted frantically, scanning the moonlit night for any sign of pursuit. I had heard countless stories of terrifying werewolves, but this encounter was beyond anything I could have imagined. I dared not share my ordeal with my grandmother, for fear that it would confirm her superstitions. In winter, farmers in our town began to lose cattle. All the hunters gathered, set traps, searched and tracked for a long time. But except for the tracks of a huge beast, they could not catch anyone. None of the hunters had ever seen such a thing, so the beast was very clever. I then thought, could this be the beast I met at night? Who I accidentally woke up in the forest? In the dimly lit sanctuary of my study, I faced the torment of my own creation. A writer's worst nightmare had me firmly in its grasp, the dreaded writer's block. My name is Kevin Stanley, and I have spent years weaving tales of terror and horror. But now, I found myself entangled in a web of my own making. Outside my study window, the world carried on oblivious to my turmoil. The incessant tapping of the keyboard echoed through the room, each keystroke a reminder of my inability to conjure the next chapter of my popular horror series. My publisher's relentless demands for a faster delivery had become the vultures circling over my creative corpse. I gazed at the shelves that lined my study, my eyes skimming over the spine of every classic horror novel. The ghosts of literary giants seemed to taunt me, their works a testament to the heights of terror that I once effortlessly scaled. Now, I stood at the precipice of a seemingly insurmountable writer's block, unable to take the next step into the abyss. My friend Bill Verdon, a fellow writer with a penchant for the macabre, had sensed my desperation. Over a late-night whiskey, he whispered of a place that had ignited a spark of curiosity within me, a spark that I hoped would be the key to unlocking my creativity. Bill spoke of an abandoned mansion, a decaying relic on the outskirts of town. This mansion had a history steeped in darkness and tragedy. It was once owned by a meat magnate named Chester, a man of wealth and privilege. He shared this opulent home with his wife and 2 children, a boy and a girl. Their lives had been a picture of happiness until a deadly disease ravaged the state, a plague carried by the tainted meat Chester sold. It led to his financial ruin, turning the mansion into a haunting reminder of his fall from grace. In the depths of despair, Chester had committed a heinous act, one that defied reason and humanity. He had taken the lives of his beloved family, their blood staining the walls of the mansion. In a final act of madness, he had turned the gun on himself, ending his torment and sealing the mansion's grim fate. Since that day, the mansion had stood abandoned, a spectral monument to a family's tragedy. But as with any place steeped in darkness, rumors and legends had taken root. Whispers spoke of a curse, a malevolent force that dwelled within the mansion's crumbling walls. Those who ventured inside were said to vanish without a trace, swallowed by the same abyss that had consumed Chester and his family. As Bill recounted these chilling tales, my skepticism wavered. Years of immersing myself in the darkest recesses of human psychology had left me desensitized to superstitions. I had explored haunted asylums, wandered through forgotten graveyards, and spent nights in the most ominous of places without encountering anything beyond the bounds of reality. Yet, the story of Chester's mansion had kindled a peculiar fascination within me, a perverse curiosity that danced with the embers of my dormant creativity. It was an opportunity to confront the supernatural firsthand, to embrace the legends and rumors that had clung to the mansion like a shroud. Perhaps, within its shadowed chambers, I would find the inspiration I so desperately sought. The journey to the mansion had been long, stretching across 2 days of winding roads and overgrown paths that led to the small town nestled amidst the dense forest. The sun hung high in the noonday sky when I finally arrived, my car parked in front of the looming edifice. The mansion, with its grandeur and history, loomed before me, a haunting beauty that defied time and decay. I stepped out of my car, my eyes tracing the intricate details of the mansion's facade. It was a structure that had once been a testament to opulence, a symbol of a family's prosperity and happiness. Now, it stood as a melancholic relic, its windows shattered and boarded up, its walls bearing the weight of neglect. Despite the ominous aura that clung to the mansion, I felt an undeniable sense of awe. The mansion's size and beauty were undeniable, and I couldn't help but be captivated by the haunting allure of its architecture. I didn't rush inside right away. Instead, I decided to explore the abandoned courtyard and garden that had once been a source of joy and serenity. As I entered the garden, a profound sadness washed over me. The passage of time had been unkind to this once vibrant place. The fountain, which had once glistened with crystal-clear water, now lay dormant and broken, a casualty of neglect. The brick paths, once meticulously maintained, had succumbed to the relentless march of nature, their surfaces marred by cracks and weeds pushing through the gaps. The garden, once teeming with life and color, was now a wilderness of overgrown bushes and unruly weeds. It was a stark reminder of the passage of time, a testament to the mansion's descent into desolation. My footsteps crunched on the dry leaves and brittle branches that littered the ground as I ventured deeper into the garden's heart. Amidst the tangle of greenery, I stumbled upon an old swing, its chains rusted and creaking with age. Nearby, an ancient, deflated leather ball lay forgotten, a relic of happier days. I couldn't help but imagine the laughter of children that had once filled the air, the echoes of their joy now silenced by the passage of years. With a heavy heart, I left the garden behind and made my way to the mansion's entrance. The crumbling facade gave way to a dusty interior, where the echoes of a bygone era still lingered. The floors bore the scars of time, their surfaces covered in a thick layer of dirt and dust. Some rooms were in a state of disrepair, their furniture broken and strewn haphazardly about. Evidence of recent visitors was scattered throughout the mansion. Traces of a fire lingered in one corner, cigarette butts and wrappers from various fast foods scattered about. It seemed that homeless individuals or adventurous students had occasionally sought refuge within these haunted walls, their presence leaving behind tangible reminders. I continued down the dimly lit hallway, my footsteps echoing through the mansion's abandoned chambers. The eerie stillness of the place hung in the air, broken only by the faint creaking of the old floorboards beneath my feet. The mansion whispered tales of its own, each room a canvas upon which stories of love, despair, and tragedy had been painted. Another horror story began to take shape in my imagination, and the mansion itself became a character in the narrative I was creating. I couldn't wait to settle down in one of the abandoned rooms, to let inspiration overwhelm me, and I opened my laptop to breathe life into the chilling story that was slowly unfolding before me. The mansion's interior was a labyrinth of grandeur and decay, far larger than it had appeared from the outside. I wandered through its echoing hallways, my mind consumed by thoughts of the horror novel that was slowly taking shape in my imagination. I had lost track of time and distance, and it was only when I reached the far end of the third-floor corridor that I realized how far I had ventured. My attention was drawn to a closed door, standing alone in the dimly lit hallway. It struck me as peculiar, for most of the mansion's rooms had been left open to the ravages of time. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached the door, my hand reaching out to turn the tarnished doorknob. To my surprise, the door refused to yield. I tried several more times, but it remained steadfastly closed. Frustration welled within me, but I decided to leave my attempts for the moment. There was the matter of a mattress to attend to, one I had left in my car, intending to spend the night within the mansion's eerie confines. As I turned away from the enigmatic door, I was struck by an eerie sensation, a sensation that sent a shiver down my spine. The silence of the mansion was shattered by the distinct sound of creaking wood. My heart raced, and I turned sharply to face the source of the sound. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the door to the mysterious room swinging open, of its own accord. A soft, yellow light spilled out into the hallway, casting long, distorted shadows across the faded wallpaper. Fear gripped me, and I swallowed hard, my throat dry and constricted. Intrigued and unnerved in equal measure, I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. I approached the room cautiously, my footsteps barely audible on the aged floorboards. I peered through the doorway, my eyes widening in surprise and confusion. Inside the room, there were two neatly made beds, each adorned with pristine, folded baby clothes. One set of clothing was clearly for a boy, while the other was for a girl. The room was unlike any other in the mansion. It was immaculate, untouched by the ravages of time. There was no dust, no dirt, and all the furniture stood intact. It was as though this room had been carefully maintained and watched over, a stark contrast to the decrepit state of the rest of the mansion. A wave of unease washed over me, and I felt a cold, sweet bead on my forehead. I decided it was best to leave the room unattended. I took a hesitant step backward and stepped away from the doorway. I wanted to separate myself from this strange room. I quickened my pace, and my footsteps echoed in the hallway as I moved farther and farther away from the strange children's room. Yet, no matter how far I walked, the sense of unease clung to me like a shadow. I pushed aside the unsettling thoughts that had begun to gnaw at me and attempted to focus on the one thing that had brought me here: the need to find inspiration for my novel. I needed to start writing, to delve into the dark recesses of my imagination and bring my story to life. But then, the ominous creaking of the door shattered my concentration once more. My heart raced as I turned around to see the door swinging open yet again. How was this possible? I had distanced myself from that strange children's room, yet here I was, inexplicably drawn back to it. A growing sense of dread twisted my insides as I peered through the open door. The room lay before me, unchanged from when I had last seen it. A pristine tableau of neatly made beds and folded baby clothes. The eerie familiarity of the scene sent shivers down my spine, and I was tormented by questions that had no answers. I made a decision to retreat once more, to put as much distance as I could between myself and that baffling room. I started to walk briskly, and then, almost instinctively, I broke into a run. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, a labyrinthine maze that refused to yield an exit. No matter how fast or how far I ran, the corridor seemed to stretch on infinitely. The echoing sound of the door creaking behind me sent a shiver down my spine, and I dared to look over my shoulder. To my horror, the children's room had reappeared once again, as though mocking my futile escape attempts. Panic gripped me, and my breath came in ragged gasps. This was beyond anything I had ever experienced in my life. I was confronted with a situation that defied all reason, a supernatural phenomenon that left me bewildered and terrified. I had always been a skeptic, a rationalist who scoffed at tales of the paranormal, but there was no denying the reality unfolding before me. With my mind clouded by fear and confusion, I resorted to desperate measures. I sprinted down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. I needed to find an escape, a way out of this nightmare. My heart pounded in my chest as I searched for stairs that would lead me back to the ground floor. But no matter how far I ran, the corridor remained unyielding, stretching endlessly before me like a malevolent force. The door creaked open once more, and I turned to see the children's room, its presence an unrelenting specter that haunted my every step. Panic overwhelmed me, and I began to feel a suffocating sense of dread. I didn't know what to do next. I was trapped in a nightmarish loop with no apparent escape. It was a sensation of helplessness I had never experienced before. Desperation drove me to try the windows, but my efforts were in vain. Every window on the third floor of the mansion was boarded up, as if to seal off any hope of escape. I tugged and pulled at the boards with all my strength, but they remained firmly in place, as though the very mansion itself conspired to imprison me within its walls. The realization that I was trapped, at the mercy of forces beyond my understanding, sent a chill down my spine. I was no longer the master of my own fate, and the creeping terror of the unknown tightened its grip on my soul. Fear had taken firm hold of me, its icy fingers wrapping around my racing heart. I continued to sprint down the seemingly endless corridor, my eyes darting around frantically for any sign of escape. The oppressive sense of entrapment weighed on me, and every passing second seemed to stretch into eternity. I came to an abrupt stop, desperation driving me to find a solution to my predicament. I knew I couldn't enter that mysterious children's room, as an unshakable sense of foreboding warned me that something terrible lurked within. Instead, I needed to flee, to put as much distance as I could between myself and that sinister doorway. My thoughts raced, a frantic whirlwind of anxiety and panic. Then, as I scanned the floor, my eyes fell upon something that sent shivers down my spine. Among the footprints that belonged to me, my own boot prints, there were other prints, animal prints. They were fresh, as if some creature had been running alongside me on the third-floor hallway. The realization struck me like a thunderbolt. I was not alone. There was something else here, something otherworldly, chasing me through the darkened corridors of the mansion. The fear that had already consumed me deepened, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. As I stared at the animal tracks it shed into the dusty floor, the sense of dread intensified. The tracks were unmistakably those of a dog, though unlike any dog I had ever encountered. I dared not linger too long on this unnerving discovery. The door to the children's room creaked open once more, breaking through my frantic thoughts. I turned to see the door swing wide, beckoning me toward it with an almost malevolent insistence. Without hesitation, I bolted away from the room, my footsteps echoing through the hallway as I ran. I ran with all the strength and endurance I could muster, my lungs burning with exertion, my thirst gnawing at my throat. I knew that if I stopped, if I allowed myself a moment's respite, I would find myself once again in the clutches of that accursed room. The minutes stretched into a torturous eternity as I pushed my body to its limits. I couldn't run indefinitely, and at last, I was forced to stop. I leaned heavily against the cold, unforgiving wall, gasping for breath, my heart pounding like a drum. As I regained my composure, I realized that the floor beneath me bore more footprints, my own and those of the mysterious animal. It was as though the creature had been chasing me relentlessly, its presence an ominous shadow at my heels. The sheer terror of my situation threatened to overwhelm me once more. I was trapped in a nightmarish labyrinth, pursued by an entity I couldn't comprehend. The door to the children's room creaked open yet again. The open door leading to the children's room beckoned me once more, but something had drastically changed. The soft yellow light that had previously bathed the room in an eerie glow had transformed into a menacing red. A sense of foreboding gripped me as I stood frozen in fear, my ragged breaths filling the tense silence. Despite the overwhelming dread, curiosity got the better of me, and I began to inch closer to the children's room. Every step I took felt like a leaden weight, and the heavy thud of my heart echoed in my ears. I approached the doorway and cautiously peered inside. What I saw within the room froze the blood in my veins. The walls, the floor, everything was covered in blood. The once neatly folded baby clothes lay strewn on the floor, soaked in crimson. The entire room seemed like a nightmarish canvas painted with the macabre hue of death. A horrified gasp escaped my lips, and I quickly covered my mouth to stifle the urge to vomit. As I stood there, paralyzed by the gruesome tableau before me, a sinister rustling sound filled the air. I turned my gaze to the dresser, where a music box sat. Its lid had sprung open, and an ominous melody emanated from within the room, casting eerie notes into the hallway. I took a step back, my heart pounding, as the haunting music filled my ears and seemed to seep into my very soul. The room pulsed with malevolence, and I knew I had to escape its clutches once more. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the corridor as I put as much distance as possible between myself and the nightmarish nursery. But the music pursued me relentlessly, growing louder and more ominous with every step. It was as though the melody was playing inside my head, a cacophony of dread that threatened to consume me. Panic clawed at my chest, urging me to run faster, to escape the haunting melody that pursued me like a relentless specter. My strength waned, and I stumbled, falling to the floor and striking my head painfully against the unforgiving surface. I fought to regain my composure, my breaths coming in ragged gasps as fear continued to grip me. I struggled to my knees, my body heavy with exhaustion and dread. As I raised my head, my eyes fell upon a door that stood not far from me. It was different, unlike any door I had seen on the third floor of the mansion before. With great effort, I managed to get to my feet and stagger toward the unfamiliar door that had appeared in the hallway. My trembling hand reached for the doorknob, and I turned it slowly. The moment I pushed the door ajar, the haunting melody that had pursued me throughout the mansion abruptly ceased. The sudden silence sent a shiver down my spine, and I instinctively recoiled. But as seconds passed and nothing else happened, I summoned the courage to approach the door once more. With a deep breath, I pushed it open fully and cautiously peered into the room beyond. The darkness within was impenetrable, and I could see almost nothing. My eyes strained in the inky blackness, slowly adjusting to the lack of light. What I saw in that dimly lit room filled me with a profound sense of dread and sent goosebumps coursing across my skin. In the center of the room, there lay a grotesque mound of clothing. Pants, jackets, boots, athletic sneakers, some worn and aged, others torn and tattered, were piled haphazardly upon one another. Backpacks and women's bags were strewn about, discarded as if in a frenzy. Yet, it was not the sight of this nightmarish clothing mountain that horrified me the most. My gaze shifted, and I spotted a sinister presence intertwined with the discarded garments, human bones. They were piled alongside the clothes, skeletal remains of unknown individuals, their twisted limbs and grim remains a testament to the horror that had unfolded within this room. Despair clenched my heart as I realized the true nature of the chamber. It was a macabre crypt, a place where death had laid claim to the living. The room was a tomb of forgotten souls, a testament to the malevolent forces that held sway within the mansion's walls. Fear threatened to paralyze me, and I took a hesitant step back, my mind struggling to comprehend the horror before me. But there was no respite, no escape from the malevolent forces that pursued me. The darkness seemed to pulse with an unseen malevolence, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive presence. As I stood frozen in terror, I heard it, an unsettling rustling sound, accompanied by heavy, labored breathing. It emanated from behind me, a menacing whisper that sent a chill through my very soul. My heart pounded in my chest, and I slowly turned to face the source of this newfound dread. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned to face the source of the menacing growling and rustling behind me. What I saw froze me in terror, a sight so horrifying that it defied all reason. There, not far from me in the dimly lit hallway, stood a monstrous beast. Its fur was as black as midnight, its claws and teeth gleaming with a malevolent hunger. Its eyes, a fiery crimson, bore into me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. The creature grinned, baring its sharp, deadly teeth, and a low, guttural growl emanated from deep within its throat. It resembled a dog, but it was anything but ordinary. It was a grotesque, nightmarish incarnation of malevolence, its size and ferocity far beyond that of any natural creature. My instincts screamed at me to flee, to escape the impending doom that loomed before me. But my terror escalated as I realized that I was not alone in this surreal nightmare. A second creature, equally monstrous and fearsome, materialized behind me. It was a colossal beast with white fur, its claws and teeth as menacing as those of its ebony counterpart. It mirrored the black dog's snarling, teeth-baring grin, and its red eyes gleamed with the same malevolent intent. I was surrounded, trapped in the claustrophobic space of a corridor with monsters with no way out. Panic overwhelmed me, and I backed away from the relentless onslaught of monstrous fangs. I clearly realized my grave mistake in underestimating the sinister reputation of this abandoned mansion. As the two nightmarish creatures closed in on me, my mind raced, desperately seeking a way out. The realization of my impending demise weighed heavily upon me, and I cursed myself for my curiosity and disbelief in the ominous rumors that had surrounded this place. In my final moments, a cruel twist of fate revealed the truth to me. As I looked upon the grotesque, grinning beasts, a memory flashed before my eyes, a faded photograph I had come across during my ill-fated exploration of the mansion. It depicted the family of the bankrupt tycoon, Chester, who had once called this place home. In the photograph, Chester, a portly man with dark hair, stood proudly outside the mansion, his blonde wife at his side. Next to them, their two children, a brunette boy and a blonde girl, smiled innocently. It was a portrait of happiness, now irrevocably tainted by the malevolent curse that had befallen them. With my fate sealed, I closed my eyes and accepted the grim reality that awaited me. The monstrous beasts drew nearer, their savage hunger ready to claim its final victim, and as their fangs descended upon me, my last thoughts were of regret, knowing that I had ventured too far into the realm of the supernatural. When darkness fell, I tipped the mug of cold coffee onto my laptop with a trembling hand. By this point, I was almost finished writing my novel, but I had to hurriedly interrupt my fantasy and search my backpack for napkins to wipe the coffee off the laptop keyboard. I sat alone in the dimly lit living room of Chester's old, decrepit mansion, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my tired face. My novel was nearly complete, and all that remained was to write the ending, a fitting demise for the book's character. The morning light filtered in through the cracked windows, casting eerie shadows across the room. Exhaustion weighed heavily upon me, and I longed for the simple comforts of rest and a hot shower. Spending the night in this forsaken place had taken its toll, and I knew it was time to leave. I closed my laptop, drained the last remnants of cold coffee from my mug, and gathered my mattress, preparing to make my escape. The mansion, though faded and worn, held a certain majestic beauty in the morning light, standing as a lonely sentinel in the midst of desolation. I paused for a moment, taking one last look at the imposing structure that had held me captive for the night. The mansion seemed very lonely. As I was saying goodbye to the mansion, a window on the third floor caught my eye. Shadows moved behind the cracked glass, and my heart raced. I squinted, trying to see what I was seeing. Two figures, one a brunette boy, and the other a blonde girl, appeared to be watching me from the window, or at least, something that resembled children. Their gaze was fixed upon me, their presence sending a chill down my spine. Panic surged through me, and I quickly retreated to my car, the engine roaring to life. I sped away from the mansion, putting as much distance between myself and that accursed place as possible. The image of the children's spectral figures in the window haunted my thoughts. As I drove, the weight of my experiences settled upon me. I couldn't help but reflect on the choices I had made in pursuit of inspiration for my novels. It was time to put an end to these adventures, to prioritize my own well-being and sanity. The road lay ahead, and I couldn't help but think that I should get a good night's sleep first. The small town of Ravenswood had always been a quiet and unassuming place, nestled deep within the shadowy embrace of a dense forest. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and where life unfolded at a pace that seemed immune to the relentless march of time. Yet, there was something about the approach of Halloween that always cast a strange and eerie spell over the town. As the chilling winds of October began to sweep through the streets, the townsfolk couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was as if the very air itself had grown thicker, heavy with the weight of secrets and mysteries yet to be unveiled. The Halloween decorations that adorned the houses and shops only added to the sense of foreboding, their ghoulish faces leering out from the shadows. I had lived in Ravenswood for most of my life, working as the town's only journalist, chronicling the mundane events that unfolded day by day. But this year, something was different. There was a whisper in the wind, a shiver in the spine, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. One crisp autumn morning, as I sipped my coffee and stared out the window of my cozy little cottage, I noticed an unusual phenomenon. A thick gray fog had rolled in overnight, blanketing the town in an impenetrable shroud. It was a fog like none I had ever seen before, so dense that it seemed to swallow everything in its path. I grabbed my camera and notebook, thinking that this eerie fog might make for an interesting story to fill the pages of the town newspaper, Ravenswood Gazette. Stepping out into the thick mist, I was immediately struck by how disorienting it was. The world had shrunk to just a few feet in front of me, and the sound of my own footsteps echoed strangely in the oppressive silence. As I ventured further into the fog, my unease grew. I knew every corner of this town like the back of my hand, but now, it felt like a labyrinth of shadows and hidden horrors. I wandered for what felt like hours, snapping photos of the fog-covered landscape, when I stumbled upon something that sent a chill down my spine. In the heart of the fog, I found a small clearing, and in the center of that clearing, there stood a decrepit, long-abandoned house. Its windows were shattered, and its wooden frame sagged under the weight of time and neglect. The house had always been there, a relic from a forgotten era, but now it seemed to have emerged from the depths of the past like a ghostly apparition. I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity, and against my better judgment, I approached the house. The front door creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. With my camera held tightly in one hand and a flashlight in the other, I stepped inside. The interior of the house was just as eerie as the outside, with cobwebs hanging like ghostly drapes and dust-covered furniture frozen in time. I moved cautiously through the rooms, the silence broken only by the soft echo of my footsteps. It was as if the very walls of the house held their breath, waiting for something to happen. As I reached the upstairs landing, I heard a strange noise coming from one of the rooms. It was a low, guttural growl, like the sound of a wild animal. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the source of the noise, my flashlight trembling in my hand. And then, in the dim light of my flashlight, I saw it, a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring at me from the darkness. I froze in terror, unable to move as the eyes drew closer, revealing a hulking, shadowy figure. It was a creature like none I had ever seen before, its form shifting and contorting in the flickering light. The fog outside seemed to seep into the room, making the creature's features even more indistinct. But one thing was clear. It was not human. Its growls grew louder and more menacing, and I knew I had to escape before it was too late. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and fled from the house, the creature's growls echoing in my ears as I raced through the thick fog. I didn't look back until I had reached the safety of my cottage, my heart pounding and my mind racing with fear. As I locked the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient and malevolent had awakened in Ravenswood. The fog, the abandoned house, and the creature, all of it was connected in a way I couldn't yet fathom. But one thing was certain. This Halloween would be unlike any other, and the horrors that lurked in the shadows of Ravenswood were far from ordinary. In the days that followed my chilling encounter with the mysterious creature in the abandoned house, Ravenswood seemed to be under a dark and unsettling spell. The thick fog persisted, refusing to dissipate, and the townsfolk moved about with an air of unease, as if they too had sensed the lurking malevolence that now hung over our once quiet town. I couldn't shake the feeling that the fog held the key to unraveling the mysteries of Ravenswood. With each passing day, I delved deeper into my research, poring over old newspapers and dusty archives in search of any clues or legends that might shed light on the strange events unfolding around us. One evening, as I sat in the dimly lit corner of the town library, I stumbled upon an old journal that had belonged to a long-forgotten resident of Ravenswood. The journal was filled with handwritten entries dating back over a century, and as I leafed through its yellowed pages, a story began to emerge, a story of darkness and transformation. According to the journal, Ravenswood had always been a town with a secret. For generations, there had been whispers of a curse that had plagued the town since its founding. The curse spoke of a creature that emerged from the shadows during the darkest nights of the year, a creature that was neither fully human nor fully beast, a werewolf. The entries in the journal described a ritual that had been passed down through the generations, a ritual designed to keep the curse at bay. It involved the lighting of ancient candles and the recitation of incantations on the eve of Halloween, a night when the boundary between the living and the dead was said to be at its thinnest. If the ritual was not performed, it was believed that the curse would awaken and the town would be plunged into darkness. As I read those words, a shiver ran down my spine. Could it be that the creature I had encountered in the abandoned house was, in fact, a living embodiment of the curse? It seemed impossible, and yet, the evidence was mounting. Determined to uncover the truth, I set out to find any living descendants of the journal's author, hoping they might hold the key to breaking the curse that had haunted Ravenswood for centuries. It was a journey that led me deep into the heart of the town, to hidden corners and forgotten graves, and to faces weathered by age and secrets. One by one, I tracked down the descendants, listening to their stories and sifting through the fragments of a shared history. It became clear that the ritual had been passed down through the generations, but in recent years, it had fallen into obscurity. The younger residents of Ravenswood had dismissed it as nothing more than superstition, a relic of a bygone era. But as Halloween approached and the fog thickened, there was a growing sense of urgency. I convinced the descendants to come together and perform the ritual, hoping against hope that it would put an end to the curse once and for all. On the eve of Halloween, we gathered in the abandoned house, the very place where I had first encountered the creature. The candles were lit, and the incantations were recited, their words carrying a weight of centuries of fear and hope. As the ritual reached its climax, a sense of unease settled over us, and I couldn't help but wonder if we had made a grave mistake. And then, as if in response to our actions, the fog outside the house began to swirl and coalesce, forming a thick, dark cloud that seemed to reach out with malevolent intent. The room grew colder, and the shadows danced in the flickering candlelight. It was then that I heard it, the same guttural growl that had haunted my nightmares since that fateful day. The creature emerged from the darkness, its yellow eyes blazing with a hunger that sent shivers down my spine. It was no longer a mere shadow, it was real, and it was here. As the descendants and I huddled together, the creature drew closer, its growls echoing in the chamber. We had hoped to break the curse, but it seemed we had only succeeded in awakening the very thing we had feared. In that moment of despair, as the creature's claws closed in on us, I realized the true nature of the curse. It wasn't a curse that could be broken with rituals or incantations. It was a curse born of the town's darkest secrets, a curse that could only be faced with the truth. And so, with a heart heavy with dread, I stepped forward and spoke the words that had long been buried beneath layers of denial and ignorance. I revealed the town's history, the whispers of the curse, and the creature that had haunted our nightmares. It was a truth that had been hidden for too long, and as I spoke, the creature began to waver, its form shifting and dissipating until it vanished into the darkness. The fog outside began to thin, and the curse that had plagued Ravenswood for centuries was lifted at last. The town was free from the shadows that had haunted it, but the cost had been high. The secrets of Ravenswood had been laid bare, and the scars of the past would not easily fade. As the fog lifted and the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder if the town would ever be the same again. The curse had been broken, but the darkness still lingered in the corners of our hearts, a reminder of the horrors we had faced.